call me David. Everyone else calls me Dave. You guys call me whatever you want. As long as it's not mean, I don't care. So, so we are, who's sick of hearing about farming? Good, because we're talking about it again, right? So, anyway, before we get going, though, I did have something that was on my heart I wanted to share with you guys. So we talk about generosity week in and week out. Talk about tithing, but I think generosity goes a little bit deeper than that, and just being generous with our time, with our talents, and everything. And I just wanted to share, so not only are we blessed when we share of our tithe and our offerings and our talents and our time in serving in God's house, so we're blessed because of that, but also we're being a blessing. So those are those seeds that are getting sown in this Good Pharma series that we've been talking about. Just wanted to encourage you of that. So, if you're not a tither, man, I really encourage you to. I would love at some point to be able to just stand up here and just share all the things that, Emily and I have seen happen in our lives just from what I believe, from tithing and and being involved in serving in church. But I just really encourage you, if you don't, take that step. If you're not currently on a team, if you're not serving, man, take that step. Go to Growth Track. See what God does through you putting in a little bit of effort, which is some of what I'm going to talk about today. But anyway, all right, so I grew up in a town called Fairmount, okay? So it's just south of here, little tiny town, farming community. And I was thinking about this as I was putting this message together. I'm going to talk about my very first job, okay? And I'm going to test something, but I was thinking about this, and so my first job ever was walking beans, okay? I was 15 years old, and I walked beans. And I got to thinking about this, and when you're from Fairmount, it's a pretty normal thing for people to walk beans in their earlier years, or it was, because I got to thinking about this, I'm like, I don't know anyone younger than me who's ever walked beans before. So just by a show of hands, if you've walked beans or detasseled corn, either one, will you raise your hand? I don't think there's anyone younger than me. One, right there, Jessica. I don't see anyone else younger than me. But anyway, so we're a pretty strong farming church here, right? We got quite a few. So through that first job, I learned a lot of stuff about farming, and then I learned a lot of things farmers do, but never understood, got any understanding behind why we were doing it. I just was doing it because I was told to do it. And so I got to kind of interview a farmer in the church, and so I'm going to be using a lot of quotes from Mr. Jared Cates, where's he at? Oh, he's in the back, over there. Yeah, give him a hand. So you can also learn about farming by tuning into his YouTube channel. So he recently started a YouTube channel, so I was doing some, research on my message by watching his YouTube show. And he's pretty good at it. So anyway, shameless plug, but everything you hear may or may not have come from Jared. I may be embellishing a bit in what he told me, and I also may be misunderstanding because I'm not a farmer. So anyway, I love this. So I ask a lot of questions. If you've been around me, at times I can ask dumb questions. I want to learn. I love to grow, but I also ask some dumb questions. So the one question, and I still vividly remember the day that I asked it at my very first job, okay? So my first job, we're walking beans, and it was a big group of my high school friends, guys and girls alike. There's about 10 of us, and we would drive to St. Joe to a seed company, and we would walk beans and do other stuff that I'll get into. And I remember asking the guy that was our leader, the full-time guy in charge of us, I was like, hey, what's the difference between soil and dirt? I hear people use that interchangeably, and he looks at me, and he's like, that's a good question. And he takes a big handful of soil or dirt, I don't know yet. I don't know what it's considered when it's in his hand, but he was sitting on the tailgate of his truck, and he throws it on his tailgate, and he's like, that's dirt. And then he brushes it off, and he's like, that's soil. I was like, all right, got it. So I don't got it, but so anyway, I always thought that was I don't know why that's a story that sticks in my brain. The very first thing I thought of when Pastor started this Good Pharma series was that story. So thought I'd share it, but Anyway, I've learned a lot, and especially in doing some research, I learned a lot about farming, and I want to share that with you today. So the biggest thing that I've kind of like tried to understand, okay, so if you're trying to be a successful farmer, okay, you want to be successful. What does that look like? Like, if you want to be more successful than last year, I guess, shall I say. There's a lot of things, long-term success, but if you want to be more successful than last year, what is it that you as a farmer are trying to do? And basically what I want everyone to do in here today, imagine yourself as a farmer, okay? So we're going to look at our lives like we are farmers of our lives, all right? And so if you want to be more successful than last year's harvest, you want to have more success, what are you going to do, okay? So I know some farmers are trying to buy up more land so they can increase, their output, their harvest. But I think one big thing farmers do, and so much of the farming industry is there's so much money in the farming industry, all wrapped up in increasing like your yields, okay? I hear that word a lot, and I'm going to say it a lot, and then I'm going to say it so much today that you're going to be like, if he says yield one more time, okay? But like bushel per acre, okay? So your yields. So in 1 acre, how much crop can I harvest out of this 1 acre, okay? So some of my verbiage, because I'm not a farmer, might be slightly wrong today. Look past it, okay? All right, so that's what we're going to talk about today. The title of my message is Increasing Your Yields. So I think God's given us a life. We all have our fields, okay? And we are sowing seeds. Pastor's been talking about sowing seeds, the law of sowing and reaping. That's what this Good Pharma series is about. And I don't know if you've realized this. It took me we're on week 9 today. And it took me until week 5 to put it together that like Good Pharma it's a pun of good karma. So like, I don't know if it took you guys, it took me 5 weeks, okay? So this is what you're dealing with today. Anyway, so Good Pharma. We're going to increase our yields. And I want to get right into the first part, okay? So we started out this, I'm going to just tell a story of my first job, the summer through my first job. The first day we show up, we go out, and we have a big 15-passenger van, and the guy drives us out. And he's like, all right, this field, you'll be able to tell the borders. You guys need to start on one end and work your way all the way across. I'm going to park the van down there. You guys, when you get down to that end, pick it up and drive back to the shop. You'll be done for the day. And so we get there, and they open up the back, and they've got just like, 50 garden hose that are just like in the back, and we all pick one, and like by the end of the summer, we're like fighting over the best ones and the wide ones, and then so they have all different types, and so some of them had like better angles than others and stuff, and you learn all this when you're in the field all day long, just knocking down weeds. So what we were told to do is, hey, everybody get in a row right next to each other, and you're going to walk your row, and as you come across the weed, you're going to knock it down. You're going to kill the weed, okay? And then you're going to keep going, and then when you get to the end of the row, you guys are all going to work your way back. So everyone's like looking down the rows really fast, and we got to the point where we're racing to rows so that we get an easy row rather than a hard one, And so that's just kind of how the summer went, and at least the beginning part of the summer, okay? So one thing I did notice is that in the beginning of the summer, we were constantly walking beans. And the beans were short then, like they're, like sticking out of the ground that much. This is layman's terms here. And so anyway, they're little. And so we're walking the rows and we're hoeing down the weeds. But then like towards the end of the year, we really didn't walk a whole lot of beans. Like we weren't really doing that once they were like big where like it was hard to get between the rows. And so I asked Jared that. I was like, hey, so why is it that like, why was that the case? And so this is what he said, and I'm going to read what Jared said most of the time. And this is somewhat of like shortening his answers because he can be long-winded. No, I'm joking. But anyway, this is what he said. He said, especially early on in a plant's life, weeds can grow up and they can steal all the sunlight from a plant. And okay, they can take over the field. They can choke out the crops. And then they're basically invading your field. So that's what That's what weeds do, is they invade your field and they start choking out all the crops that you're trying to grow. So you've put all this work into sowing good seeds, and the weeds can choke it out, all right? As crops mature, okay, so as the beans mature, they canopy out, is what he said. So I thought that was pretty cool. So they canopy out, and they don't require as much work because of the canopy keeps sunlight from getting to new weeds, and it basically keeps it to where the weeds can't grow up as well because the crops have matured, okay? So let's take that, look at our own lives, okay? What might be weeds in our lives, okay? So here's a few examples that I thought of. Undealt with sin, maybe a bad thought process, an unhealthy habit you have, bad attitudes, wrong ways of thinking, selfishness, okay, addiction, pride. Who knows what it is? Those are the ones I typed down. And as I was looking at my own life, just write them all down. So anyway, but if we want to develop a good crop, if we want to really increase our yield, we've got to go through and we've got to knock the weeds down and kill all the weeds, okay, in whatever field you've planted in, okay? So I'm looking at that in my own life, and I'm just like, okay, so a great way for me to really increase my yield, to really see God's movement in my life, to really change my life and just really have a good harvest. The first thing is let's kill all the weeds. Anything that we see, let's try to find those weeds and let's kill them. We could get into spraying pre-emergent and all this stuff that Jared talked about, but my eyes went cross-eyed and I was like, that's too much, man. So anyway, I think as a new believer, okay, as someone who maybe just comes to Christianity, I think it's very important that when the crops are young, that we try to do our best. If we know of areas that we need to work on, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if someone's never been to church in their life. If they're struggling with something, you know it for the most part. We know, right? And so what can we do to eliminate that? Get rid of that, kill that weed, whatever it is. Then those crops grow up and they mature, and we start seeing the fruits of our labor, and maybe we don't have to work as hard, but yet there's still a lot of weeds. Here's the thing, even mature fields, you'll go past and you'll see around the edges and stuff, you'll see a bunch of weeds that have grown up and kind of taken over a little corner of beans and stuff like that. Okay, so even as mature believers, we should always be looking to kill the weeds in our life, because there's always more yield we can see. There's always more increase that we can see if we were to just continue to kill those weeds, okay? So mature believers, even people that have been coming to church long before I was, we all have stuff. Everybody's got stuff. Nobody's perfect, right? So a big way that we can see God moving more and more and more in our lives is killing the weeds. And I think one thing that I've noticed that happens even with me is that, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but it's almost like some of the weeds you just get used to. You just get used to those, this has just always been a thing, and I've just struggled with it for a long time. But yet, what are we doing to me, that's a weed that's really taken root maybe. And, as pastors talked about, whether you're sowing good seeds or bad seeds, seeds are being sown. And weeds grow just the same way the good plants do. The seeds are still coming off the weeds and they're growing and expanding, I think. I don't really know if that's true, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Yeah, Jared's shaking his head yes, so we're good. We're good. All right, so anyway, that wasn't in my notes, so I was just kind of going with it there. So anyway, all right, let me read a verse and let's bring this all back to the Bible. Romans 6:15 through 16 says, so what should we do? Should we sin because we're under grace and not under the law? Okay, so basically what this means is when Jesus came, died on the cross for our sins, we're now living under grace, okay? Which means we don't have to go make sacrifices and that type of thing. Okay, so we're under grace now, God's grace. God was so gracious that he sent his son to die on the cross for our sins, okay? So now that's what it's saying, not under the law, it's under grace. So can we just go sin and just live our lives? Certainly not. Surely you know that you become slaves to whatever you give yourselves to. Think about that. Okay, so basically, if we let the weeds just run rampant in our life, they're just going to keep running rampant. That's going to take over our life, and we're not going to see the fruit that God has for us in our life. So, all right, I got to get back to where I'm at. Okay, anything or anyone you follow will be your master. If you follow sin, you can follow sin, or you can follow or obey God. Following sin brings death, but obeying God makes you right with him, spiritual death, but makes you right with him. So, we want to follow God, we want to obey God, and we want to kill the weeds in our life. The weeds can be, this is saying sin, but I mean, man, sin can be a lot of things, and what's crazy is, well, never mind, I don't want to get into that yet. Okay, so, as Pastor said, I don't want to spoil my next point, guys, okay? So, as Pastor said, if we aren't intentionally sowing good seeds, seeds are still being sown. So, things like sin, distractions, even distractions. Think about this, like a distraction necessarily isn't a sin, but it could become one because it starts controlling our life and takes our eye off the ball. So like even things as distractions, maybe a weed, maybe that's a weed that we need to knock down is like, hey, let's stay focused here. Okay? Unhealthy relationships, unforgiveness, bad habits, bad attitudes, bad thoughts. All of those things can take over your field and decrease your yields. Okay? So, as the summer went on, like I said, we kind of stopped spending as much time walking beans. They started having us do other things. So like I said, this is a seed company, not a farm. So this is a seed company. So they had what they called a test plot, a test field. They called it a test plot, I think. This is, I hate to break it to you, but this was when I was 15 and I'm now 34, so memory here. It's further away than what I thought. So anyway, so we go out to this test plot. I can vividly remember the day. We're in our 15-passenger van. We go out to the test plot, and I get out, and they hand us two things, and it was the weirdest two things ever. They handed me a burlap sack, and they handed me a pair of tweezers. And I was like, what are we doing? And they said, we are going to cross-pollinate, okay? So, have you done this before? Oh, okay. So, she's acting like she knows. She doesn't know. You don't know the pain. So, we were going to cross-pollinate. And I'm like, what in the world are we going to do with a burlap sack? Turns out, a burlap sack was basically used to lay out so you're not just laying in the mud, okay? So you just sat on the burlap sack. And then you use the tweezers and you get up underneath all of the canopy of beans. And I didn't know this until that time, but like bean plants have like little tiny flowers on them, and they're like tiny, okay? And then that's the male, I think. I can't, from what I remember. I think that was the male portion, and you take the pollen from that with your little tweezers. So you have to pluck you have to get like this close. You have to get super close, and you're down, and like, I'm not flexible. I've never been able to sit Indian style. So like, I was laying on my side and trying to like pluck the flowers, and I'm real close to it, and you have to take the little pollen thing, and then so that was labeled, and so I know I'm taking the pollen from this one, and then they give you the other list, and they're like, okay, over here is where you're going to go, and you're going to pollinate this row here, and so we would take the pollen, we go over there, and then you have to, then there's like these little like buds. They look like a flower about to bud, and you got to pull the shell off around it, really tiny. And you take the pollen and you dab it in there. And they taught us how to do all this, which, like looking back, I'm like, teaching 15-year-olds to do this, not cool. So anyway, we thought walking beans was bad. It was nothing compared to cross-pollinating, okay? So what they told us on the front end, which why they did this, I don't know, but they were like on the front end, they were like, hey, so we're gonna do this for a week or so, and then we'll wait, and then we'll see who has the best cross-pollination percentage, and those people will continue doing this through the year, and the rest of you will go back to doing other things, okay? So I'm just like doing my best, like doing what I'm supposed to be doing and stuff. And at the end of that week, like we were talking about it, I remember on the way home we were talking about it because it's like, man, I'm glad that week's over. And we were getting ready to go on vacation. So I'm like, man, I'm glad that week's over. And all my friends were like, yeah, I know. Like we've just basically they were, what do you call it, sandbagging or whatever you want to call it. Like they weren't trying very hard because they wanted to tank their percentages. And I'm like, I've been doing my best, people. So anyway, I go on vacation, come back, and my friends, I was still 15, my friends are picking me up, we're going to work, and they're like, hey, Dave, guess what? I was like, what? They were like, you had the highest percentages by a long shot. So I got to cross-pollinate a lot more, guys. I built character, though. I built so much character. So anyway, getting back to the message, cross-pollinating. I asked, this is one of those things like, why I asked the difference between soil and dirt, but I never asked what the point was of cross-pollinating. No idea. Never crossed my mind to ask why. Why do we do this? But there's reason, okay? So I asked Jared, why do we cross-pollinate, Jared? And he basically said this: cross-pollinating is used, this is summarizing his words, so it might be wrong, but basically it's used to develop stronger crops, okay, that are less susceptible to storms and droughts or disease or anything like that. So basically, they're trying to make these new species of beings that are just stronger, more resilient to all the things that could happen in the world, okay? So before I kind of break this down, I want to read a verse, a little bit more than that. Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12. That's 3. All right, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. So I don't know if you guys get where I'm going with cross-pollination, but let's bring it in, okay? So when we are intentional about spending time around people who are making us better, who are helping us become better, we're stronger together. We're here in church. We're spending our time in church. We're doing things that our church provides us, like, I don't know, small groups, or joining a team where we're building our relationship with people that are here and that are helping us become better. Maybe you're getting around people where they're strong in an area that you're weak, and vice versa. Maybe you're getting around people who are much further along and much wiser than you, and they help you become stronger in every area. But just as cross-pollinating goes, you're developing stronger crops, basically, that are less susceptible to all the things that could happen in your life, and you're increasing your harvest, possibly. I think that's another thing he said I forgot about. But anyway, you're increasing the yields in your field by cross-pollinating, being around other believers and other people that are helping you become better. So let me read another verse to you so we can really hone this in. Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. And let us consider how to stir one another up to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. And in the Bible that I was reading, day was capital D. So I think that's like, the end, as the end draws near, like, let's be more encouraging. Let's help each other. So I've got some questions for you, okay? Let's be a little introspective here. Am I looking to be an encouragement to others? Am I working to help people become better? Am I thinking like that? Or am I just kind of like wanting to have fun and enjoy life and hang around people and like, yeah, I want to be around my church friends, but I'm actually dragging them down rather than lifting them up? Are you putting yourself around people who are helping you become better? Or are you just like willy-nilly going through life, letting weeds spread in your gardens and not really thinking about the fact that like, hey, this person's not really good for me. They're not really helping me become a better person. They're making it worse. Are you letting go of your pride and realizing that people can actually help you become a better person? Or are you just like, are you being really prideful and not really looking to get better? So the opposite of that can go the same, right? We can be around the wrong people. We can be around people that are really bringing us down. We can spend a lot of time with people who aren't really helping us become the person that we should be, and instead we're letting their bad habits, their bad ways, their thought processes, their bad attitudes infiltrate our lives. And next thing you know, we're getting drugged down with them. And what's really sad is sometimes we're here, and this is really the worst yet. Sometimes we're here at church, and we're spending time with people we've met in church, and we are spending time with them, but they've got bad attitudes and bad thought processes that they're not dealing with, and it infiltrates us. And even though we met them in church, they're not working on their stuff, they're not weeding their gardens, and their weeds are infiltrating my garden, right? So we got to be careful about stuff like that and make sure that we are being cognizant of the yields of our crops, right? We want to make sure that we're thinking about the fact that we got to be careful about who we spend our time with. And this is something, man, back in Switch, we talk about this all the time because you are who you hang with. As Pastor always says, if you hang out with a duck, you're going to be a duck, okay? But let's hang out with eagles so we can soar, right? So he says something like that. I feel like I made that way cooler than he makes it. But so anyway, as I was thinking about this, I'm like, man, I would absolutely hate it. And I know I've done it. That's the problem. I know I've done it. I would absolutely hate it if I had stuff that I didn't deal with in my life and I infected someone else's crops because of it. And I know I've done it. That's what's sad about it. And we've all done it because none of us are perfect. But let's be intentional about thinking about, man, what are the weeds in my life that I need to really weed out of here? Because I definitely don't want to infiltrate other people's lives as I go and I cross-pollinate with other believers. So, okay. Now, I have one other wise thing about cross-pollination, okay? And this comes down to a story I have about my father-in-law, who is a green thumb, okay? This dude can grow, like, beautiful things, and I cannot. So we bought our first house when we first got married way too quickly, way too much house, and put ourselves in terrible financial position. That might have been sowing a little bit of a bad seed, but it worked out in the end. But anyway, long story short, we were in a house, and it didn't really have much landscaping other than this like little section, and it had like a real big bush on one side, and then it just had I think it had flowers when we first moved in, and I think they were perennials, but I really let the weeds get to going, and they choked them out. Lesson there, all right? So I spent a whole big day, and I weeded that whole garden, and I ripped out so much stuff, and I weeded around what little flowers were left, and whatever bushes, things. Anyway, I weeded around the stuff that looked pretty, basically. And Skip and Susie came over, and I was kind of showing off to Skip, trying to really up my street cred with Skip. And I'm like, hey, Skip, look, I've taken care of my flower garden. Isn't it nice? And Skip is I don't know who doesn't know Skip, but he's one of the sweetest guys you will ever meet. And he never wants to hurt anyone's feelings. But also, I've definitely made it a point to make sure that Skip always feels safe to tell me things. And there's a reason behind me saying this. And Skip goes, hey, just so you know, this one and that one, those are actually weeds. And I'm like, they look so pretty though, Skip. And so anyway, he pointed out a weed in my garden that I thought was a good thing, that looked pretty. And so, I'm just saying, this is another wise point behind cross-pollinating. This is something I have done, and I can tell you the fruits that have come from this, and that's opening myself up to be mentored. Be intentional about looking for people that can speak into your life, that have been there, that have done it, that have got the t-shirt, and that can share their experiences and help you grow through things and go through things that, life's coming, storms are coming, And those people have been through it. They've got strength there. And so maybe even they haven't been through it, but maybe they're strong in the Word, right? Maybe they've really got a good knowledge of the Bible and all the things in it and principles, and they can help point things out to you. The other thing, so what Skip really did is he pointed out a blind spot that I had, right? Like, I thought that this was a good thing in my life, okay? And what a mentor can do is a mentor can say, hey, man, like, I know you really love this, but I just really think you need to take a second look at that. And, I don't think it's really healthy for you right now. You look at it. Just look at it. And so I want to tell a little bit of a story about one thing that did happen in my life, and that is I have opened myself up to being mentored, as I said. One of the main people that I've just spent a lot of time around is Pastor Archie. Pastor Archie knows me better than, other than maybe Jessica and Skip. He knows me very well, okay? He knows a lot about me. And so I've spent a lot of time around him. That's one thing, you want to search that out. And that's one thing Pastor Archie has told me. Hey, here's the deal. If you want to spend time with me, you need to reach out to me. I don't want to be trying to force things down your throat. If you want to learn or if you want to be with me, man, call me. I'm more than that. He says that to all of us, doesn't he? Hey, just reach out. I want to help you. So anyway, this was probably 10 years ago. Pastor Archie and I go and we have coffee, and this is really before we had really gotten close. And but I've spent a lot of time around him, and we were having coffee, and he never comes out and just says this. It's more like he waits for you to bring something up, and then it's like, oh, well, I'm glad you brought that up. So I said something about I was struggling with X, and he's like, hey, so here's the deal. And he's like, I want to say this out of love, but this is going to sting a little bit. And he's like, hey, man, you've got some pride in your life. And he's like, I had a lot of pride that I had to let go of. And I'm just going to tell you right now, there's a lot of good that can come from you just letting go. But what I see is, and he kind of went to explain the things he sees in my life of things I had been doing or actions I had been taking. And I found out oh yeah, I need to work on that. So I've been on a 10-year journey of letting go of pride. I'd love to tell you that I've successfully, completely killed that weed, but I think there's still some weeds there. There always is. I think all of us have a little bit of pride issue. Some of us even have pride even just listening to people, letting people tell us the things that are wrong. So I want to read this verse really quick. Proverbs 18:1. Some people like to do things their own way, and they get upset when people give them advice. Fools don't want to learn from others. They only want to tell their own ideas. How many people in your life can you think about? Don't raise your hand. But how many people in your life do you think about that you're like, man, I know that type of person? Well, the fact of the matter is all of us are like that to an extent. And that's one of those pride things. We've got to get over our pride. We've got to be willing to listen and learn from people. Because we don't know it all. Nobody knows it all. So, ask yourself this. Do you have someone in your life that has the green light to point out your blind spots? Do you have somebody in your life that you're like, hey, this is going to hurt, I know. When I left Pastor Art, when we left having coffee, I was upset. It hurt. That hurt to hear. And I was kind of mad at him at first, and then I was like, things start happening, and you're like, oh, I see what he's talking about. That's how it works, okay? And that's okay. But we have to open ourselves up to that, because if we don't open ourselves up to that, how are we ever going to get better? If we don't have somebody willing to tell us the truth in love, how do you ever know, really? How? So, for me, Pastor telling me that was huge, because that started the process of me realizing how important mentors are in your life. How much growth can come from that. And, mentors, when someone is a true, has that, mentorship mentality and spirit about them, no matter what area of life it is, this doesn't even have to be a church-related thing, whatever every area of life is, when people have found success in something, typically they're pretty eager to, share and eager to help. They, people want to help, more than you realize. So that really started that process for me of just opening myself up to just hey, I'm an open book. Like, come on, like, give me what you got. Okay, I appreciate that feedback. I hate you for it, but I appreciate it. No. All right, then the last thing, this is my last point. I'll make it quick, all right? I'm going to make it quick because I've got to get over my pride to admit this out loud. I love giving all farmers. I grew up around farmers, like a farming community. All my friends were, I jokingly say, poor farmers, and they all pull in their big trucks and stuff in high school and all that, big rims and all that, but poor farmers. I'm joking. I'm joking again, people, I'm joking. Anyway, so I joke a lot about how farmers, they work really hard for 1 month in the spring and really hard for 1 month in the fall, and all the rest of the time, they're just watching Days of Our Lives, just soaking it in, living the good life. And so anyway, so I actually started watching Jared's YouTube, and this is why I brought up his YouTube channel. So I started watching it, and like I love joking with farmers about this. Like I know they work hard. Like I know you guys are doing stuff, but whatever. Like I don't know what you do. And so I started watching this YouTube channel, and dude, they're like ripping trees out, like a whole row of trees so that they can plant just a few more rows, There's a message, right? Like expanding what acreage you've got. Like let's expand, let's get more yields, let's get rid of the rough ground, and let's make it tillable, and let's make it plantable, right? Like that's how you increase your yields. And he's like mowing ditches, and they're what else are they doing? He's like fixing his helpers' mistakes. Like, I didn't throw that in. My brother-in-law is his helper. And so Dustin, I watched one video where Dustin ran over a boulder with the mower, and they had to fix the mower. Anyway, but they're just working on machinery, thinking about what's next. Okay, planting season's coming up. Like what seed are we going to be planting this year? Like even when they're at home at night, they're thinking about like what is it that I need to be thinking? What are we working on next week, next month? Okay, we need what equipment did we have issues with last year? We need to get resolved. We need to get fixed. What do we need to upgrade? All the things. Okay, how much do we need to haul? Grain prices just went up. We need to make sure we get as much bang for our buck. So let's start hauling. Let's sell all that stuff. So anyway, what I realized though is farming is like not just a 9 to 5 like a lot of us are maybe used to. Farming is like a lifestyle, right? Okay, so let me read this. Proverbs 24:30-34. I walked by the field of a lazy person, the vineyard of one with no common sense. I saw that it was overgrown with nettles, and I Googled it. Nettles are weeds. It was covered with weeds, and its walls were broken down. Then as I looked and thought about it, I learned this lesson. A little extra sleep, a little more slumber, a little folding of hands to rest. Then poverty will pounce on you like a bandit. Scarcity will attack you like an armed robber. So once again, farmers, this is a lifestyle. Like they have to do this because they know if they don't, their yields decrease, they're poor, famine, everyone dies. So we all starve to death. So anyway, but that's what farming is, a lifestyle, okay? So they can't shut it off. They go on vacation, they're still thinking about like, hey, what do I got to do when I get back? What phone calls do I need to be making when I'm on vacation? All the things, they got to think ahead, because if you don't, you're in trouble. This isn't like, we can't just shut it off and leave for a week and come back and then try to catch up. Like you got to keep, there's stuff you got to do. Okay, so point number 3 is work consistently, okay? Work consistently. So just as farmers, us in our Christian lives, man, think about all the things that we should, if we just develop daily habits, okay? Just develop the daily habits to read your Bible, pray, spend a little alone time with God. Like, just imagine what that might produce. The difference between a good farmer and a bad farmer is a good farmer understands that their work is worth it. Like their output is, it's worth it because it produces more. They get more yields, okay? Just the same as our lives, we got to do the work. We got to stay consistent. And I mean, not to say that that being a follower of Christ it requires a lot of work, but honestly, let's put in the time. This is what I would say. It probably feels like work on the front end. And then you start doing it and you start reaping the benefits of it. You see the growth in your life. You see the peace that comes with that, the joy that comes with that. And you go through things that would typically just wreck your world, but yet you've spent enough time with God and you have enough faith in God to know, hey, like this is all going to work out. God's bringing us through this. He did with that. Just like what David said, hey, he delivered me from the hand of the lion and delivered me from the hand of the bear. Like, who cares about this, this giant? Same thing. Like, when you do consistently, when you're putting in that effort consistently to develop your relationship with God, man, like, life changes. Life changes. It becomes better. You start yielding more. You increase your yields per acre, okay? So, I just encourage you guys, watch what God does. Watch what God does when you put in the effort. So the last thing, as I was kind of writing my closing, I had this thought process, or this thought pop into my head, and I believe that this is a Holy Spirit-driven thing, and I want to just say this, okay? So, does anyone know a farmer whose parents didn't farm, and they started farming, and then their kids didn't farm either? Like, they just went, they owned a bunch of land, they farmed, and then they just closed shop. Like, no, you don't grow up thinking that way. Farmers have a thought process of legacy. Like, they have a thought process of like, hey, I want to leave this for my kids. I want to make sure that I'm leaving them, the farm and make sure it's in good health. And like, man, if I can increase my yields, I know that it's going to help my kids in the long run. If I can get a little bit better at farming, that's going to help my kids and their grandkids, and just down the line. Okay, so I'm not even talking about just family, but man, if you really want to look at it and you've got kids, like think about, man, if I take care of my stuff, if I can help my kids grow through stuff, and maybe I don't pass down the bad, maybe I don't pass down my weeds, but I pass down a good, bountiful harvest of like the things I've built up in my life, man, what's that look like? Man, if I have a healthy relationship with God, what can I do for my kids? Like, how can I help my kids if I'm healthy? Okay? So farmers have this legacy mindset, in my opinion. I'm sure there's some out there are some anomalies, but in general, I think we all know some farmers, it's a family thing. And so I want to look at that like that. So if you don't have family in here, I'm not talking like you only bloodlines, but like, hey, make friends. Like we all have friends that don't know who God is. Like, let's make a legacy there. Let's help them get their life together, and let's really spread. That's what the Great Commission is, right? Like, that's what we're supposed to be doing as Christians, is helping grow God's kingdom. Okay, that's why we do what we do here at church, is to help grow God's kingdom. So, just like farmers, I think we need to also just look at things in a generational way. Look at things in a way where, man, like, let's grow. Like, let's make sure that we leave the world better than we found it, right? So, leave the farm better than we found it. Let's make sure we figure things out so we can help the next generation. So, on top of just, increasing yields in our lives, let's think about that. Maybe you're in here and you're like, I've never really thought about increasing the yields or, getting rid of the weeds in my life and all the things that hold me back. But I guess maybe for you, this might be a day where you're just like, oh, that's a wise thing, Dave. Yeah, you're welcome. No, that came from God, not me. But anyway, I think there's also people in here where I think, as I was writing this message and putting it together and putting together the thought process, there are things flooding into my brain that I need to spend more time with God. I know, that's something that would be super wise of me. Or, there's this thing, I need to change this habit. I've got an attitude issue in this area. I've got a bad thought process in this area, and continue to grow, because I just realized, especially after thinking generationally, man, it's important that we take care of our stuff so that we're not leaving that for the next people that are behind us, whether that be the next generation or that be someone that you're cross-pollinating with here at church. Let's take care of our stuff so that we can develop really a healthy lifestyle for us, but other people as well. Right? That's really where we want to get to. So, just realize the benefits that come from that. I think the more and more and more you do it, Pastor Archie's a very good example of that. The more he's dealt with stuff, the more he's worked past things and gotten through things, man, the more he's realized what more God has for him. And that's what it's all about. Like, man, God's put talents in you. He's put gifts in you. You have abilities that you don't even know you have. Like, I'm up here right now. Like, that's not something that I could do. I couldn't. Took a speech class at DAC and got a C in it. Like, that's not, but God. And that's really what it comes down to. Like, man, you have, each and every person in this room has things that God's put in them they don't even realize yet. And man, we got to keep moving forward, weeding the garden, work consistently, cross-pollinate, and let's see what develops in our lives, right? All right, awesome.